My name is Nancy Gilson. I'm the Director of Academic Programs and Student Affairs for GPS, and worked alongside faculty to put the BA MPP together. And so it's a program that is sort of near and dear to my heart. I oversee two other 5-year programs, one with the International Studies program, which is actually 3 tracks through international studies, and a BA MIA program also with a political science department. And so these are sort of my, if you will, these are sort of my babies. So let me welcome you all and tell you that it makes me very happy that you guys are all interested in the program. And so I think what we'll do is we'll go through the slides. I promise not to read them all to you word for word because I know that you can all read. That's how you got in. And I'll sort of riff off the slides, and then we can take questions in the chat unless you have something that's really pressing because there's something that I've made completely muddy and opaque, in which case put it in the chat and I'll try to answer it. But at the end, we'll take questions, we'll have a conversation so that you get as much information at this moment that you want and can absorb, okay? So welcome, and yeah, Amy, let's do this. Can I change the slides, or do you need to do that? Can I? I mean,
I think I have control unless you would like to remote.
No, that's fine. You can. Okay. No, let's not change the settings now. It'll get started. Okay. As long as you can change the slides and let people in at the same time. Okay. So so in lots of ways, when we first began to talk with when the faculty and I at the School of Global Policy and Strategy began to talk with the faculty at the Department of Economics, it was really clear to us that the BA MPP was a natural program for us to collaborate on, because the skills in the economics department are really the ones that are foundational and central to both the evaluation of public policy and the creation of new public policy, thinking about how to address public issues. If you think about what public policy is, which is, policy typically that comes from, depending upon the size of the state and the configuration of the government, that comes from the federal government or the state government, which is intended to provide goods and services at the local level. The assumption is that for some reason, the market has failed to provide those goods, or the market was not intended to be the sole provider for those goods. Think here about education, healthcare, infrastructure, poverty programs, income support programs, which are all in the news these days to talk about economic recovery and social safety nets when unemployment becomes scarce or evictions become sort of pandemic, if you will. That's what social policy does. That's public policy. And so one question you ask is, why is it that the market failed? That's an important economic question. And then how do you pay for it? How do you design policy? What's a good policy? And then how do you extract money out of basically the public in order to pay for it? It's tax dollars that fund these kinds of programs. And so these are all things, as you know, that's how the government gets money, it doesn't print it. Some little guy in the basement just printing it away. It doesn't happen like that. Though I used to think that when I was 6, but so the thing that GPS brings to the table on this, you guys come into the program with this set of skills in microeconomics and macroeconomics and econometrics. What GPS brings to the table on this is, first of all, a very clear look and expertise in talking about where policy comes from, what are the institutions and the political processes that identify policy needs, that design policy, that put it in place, and then, evaluate it, and then applied classes in healthcare, in environmental governance, in education, in the field of labor, all kinds of social welfare questions. We do that. That's what our faculty does. And so this becomes a very natural program that draws on the strengths of the two faculty. So it's really designed, as the center bullet point here puts it. This is really a program that's designed for those of you who are interested in both policy design and evaluation, and in particular, the methodology and the application of policy design and evaluation. How do you know if a program works? You gather data, you run the data, you have to define, you have to decide how the data gathering is going to be designed. What are the best ways to do that? What's the best methodology? And one of the interesting things about GPS that makes it different as a Master of Public Policy from most others is that we look not only at the United States, but we look at policy expertise around the world. And so while you can certainly focus on the US, unlike a lot of places, unlike a lot of MPP programs, we do not assume that the United States is necessarily the designer of best practices in any policy area. The 25 of us that are here on the Zoom call could probably have a very interesting conversation about, for example, guaranteed family income, or better policies for when families have small children and provision of daycare, and should governments pay for them, and how should governments pay for them, and how much money should people get toward it, and so on. So those are the kinds of conversations and the kinds of comparisons, the US versus Europe or the US versus Asia, in thinking about best practices. So the BA MPP is open only to standard economics majors. So if you are math, econ, or management science, you would have to change your major eventually to the standard econ major, EN 25. And then once you apply and are admitted to the program, then you would change your major to the economics public policy bachelor's track. And that economics track is open only to students who have applied and been admitted to the BA MPP. So you would graduate with your bachelor's degree in economics public policy, and then you would have an additional year in which you would matriculate to graduate standing, where you'd actually get your master's of public policy. The BA MPP has the exact same curriculum as the 2-year MPP. And so you're getting a graduate degree that other people, you're getting a graduate degree with one additional year that students who are graduating in other fields have to spend 2 years at the graduate level to get. So there's really an efficiency here, both in terms of cost, but also in terms of time. You can all grow up faster and go out into the workforce sooner than you thought. Next slide. Okay, so this is Amy's work here, this lovely graphic that sort of shows you, at what point you begin graduate work. So if you came into UCSD as a freshman and you look at this, you'll see that you apply during year 3, your junior year. And then in year 4, while you're still an undergraduate, the reason the little square is light blue and dark blue is that you're still an undergraduate, and you may be doing, finishing up undergraduate coursework, an elective in economics, or if you have a minor or a double major, you may still be doing undergraduate coursework. But that year you will also begin to do graduate work. So in that year, you're sort of a kind of undergraduate, a kind of graduate student. But with respect to GPS, you move completely into, into being a graduate student and melding into the graduate cohort. If you come in as a transfer, if you came into UCSD as a transfer student, the assumption here is that you come in with your lower division coursework completed, which we know, by the way, isn't necessarily the case. You apply in the spring of your first year, and then you occupy that, half light blue, half dark blue slide, that square, and then graduate with your bachelor's degree, and then have one additional year. We know that some people, transfer students, because of where you went to school, maybe don't have all of the lower division coursework that you need to do. Maybe you didn't finish the math sequence because you went someplace that didn't have a full math sequence. Or you have GEs because you're in one of the colleges that has more transfer GEs. So we know that it may be, in fact, that you apply in your second year to complete the first year of graduate core with a third year. So there's an additional year here. We know that. But this is a neater graphic. That's sort of creating a graphic that takes account of every possibility of the way that this can be done is impossible. This is a lovely graphic. I think you get the idea. Next. Okay, so this is a broad overview of the coursework that breaks it down into the lower division requirements, the upper division requirements, and then the GPS requirements for your second year in the program, which is actually the graduate year. And so one of the things that I want to point out to you, and we're going to look at the coursework in general, but I believe that there's no such thing sometimes as too much repetition in getting the details right, is that the lower division requirements, when you look at them, you're going to see that they're not any different than what you've already been asked to do by the department. The upper division requirements, though, are different from the standard EN 25 major, in that you have a different elective requirement than the regular major, and you will be taking GPS core classes, some of which will be allowed to count toward your major, and some of which are just required by GPS as part of the core. And then once you graduate with your bachelor's degree, you'll move into the second year, which requires you to complete 48 units, at which you'll have a policy area of specialization, and we'll talk about that. A public policy capstone, which is a research capstone in which you'll have to design your own research project. It's sort of writing the equivalent of a master's essay on a topic of your own choice, working closely with GPS faculty, and then other electives or prerequisites and other, for example, skills class. If you come in and decide you want to run the table on GIS and remote sensing, classes so that you can make really cool maps using Google Earth stuff, then you can do that as well. Next. So again, you should know these 10 ABC or 20 ABC, depending upon what you want to do. And then the lower division economics courses 1 and 3. We don't require you to do Econ 2 because we have you take a market failures class that's actually taught by Econ faculty. So you have only these 2 requirements. So these are just the Econ prerequisites that allow you to move into the Econ upper division courses. These obviously doesn't include any of the GE requirements that you may have associated with your college, right? Or other majors or minors or just other things that you're choosing to explore, okay? Next. Then these are the upper division requirements then within econ. You have to do the 100 series, the 110, the 120. So macro, micro, macro, and 2 advanced economics electives from a list that's been put together by the econ department and is on the website and also on the checklist that I do when I meet with students one-on-one. So it's a fairly simple set of requirements for you to keep in mind. What order you do them in, whether you should do the econometrics before the macro is up to you. Or up to the department. They know that better than I do. My PhD is in political philosophy, so I don't know that stuff. So this is a good question. So Mitchell, I'm assuming that you took them last spring. If they were,
yeah.
Did you? Okay. So if you took them last spring when we were all asked to be kind because all classes got thrown up on Zoom in like 2 weeks, yes, we will. In that moment that wasn't pretty for anybody, we will allow that. Okay. So not to worry about that. Okay. Next slide. And so this is the MPP coursework that you'll be taking in your senior year, okay? So you may still be working on, on your upper division electives. You may be working on other coursework for minors or a double major, but this is the coursework that you'll be doing for me at GPS. Our assumption is that you're coming into this senior year with, certainly with the micro and the econometric sequence done. There'll be room here for you to do macro if you're doing that last. But I want to make sure that you understand that these are graduate level courses. So while you're absolutely capable of doing the work and doing it incredibly well, graduate courses tend to move a little bit more quickly and they tend to have a lot more work associated with them. So these are the courses. So in the fall, you'll have one core class, policy analysis and public welfare, is basically an introduction to the political science side of policy analysis. How does policy get made? What are the institutions, a kind of comparative look at this. Why is it, for example, that you get guaranteed family income in Europe, but not in the United States? The answer to that question is not because the Europeans have more left politics in the United States. As you know, the United States has a long history of social democratic politics. A lot of it has to do with the institutions themselves that make policy. So introducing you to that, and then the idea of social safety nets, but then also teaching you how to write policy memos. Out in the world of policy work, knowing how to write a policy memo, in some cases 2 pages long, in some cases 20 pages long, is a real art. A policy memo is a very particular kind of thing. So, we spend the first quarter teaching you how to do that. Winter quarter is policymaking processes and the market failures class and policy interventions. The policymaking processes is one that sort of takes the first quarter and really begins to look at interest group politics, gets more deeply into the more advanced political science literature on how policy is made. The market failures class is actually taught by one of the economics faculty. And this really, is the question that says, why do markets fail? It's the sort of counter argument to the more traditional idea that, markets are good. Markets are, markets create a kind of equilibrium. They're buyers and they're sellers. And, what you get is really what society wants. A market failures class begins with the assumption that markets sometimes don't produce goods that societies need. right? And then in the spring, you'll be taking public finance and taxation, which is also taught by an economist, Alex Gelber. And this is how do you pay for it? So it's one thing to say that you want, let's say, free education. It's another thing to say how you're actually going to then pay the people who are going to teach those classes, because they don't work for free. And then people say, oh, I love my job so much, I do it for free. No, they wouldn't. No one would. And then the policy analysis class that you take in spring is really, it's really a decision theory class. So modeling decision making. It's one thing to talk about how institutions work and how people fight over policy. It's another thing to really look to model out very closely what are the inputs and what's excluded from decision making. And so, you know, it's very important to kind of to model these things out using very careful sort of quantitative methods. And that's a class that's taught by one of our scientists who actually teaches also at Scripps Institution of Oceanography, Kate Rickey, and a lot of the policy issues she looks at have to do with the environment, climate change, and energy as just a way of thinking about this in the real world. Amy? So these are the areas of specialization. So each of you will have to choose an area of specialization. You can actually choose 2 if you want. I saw a question in there about having room to take other classes. The answer to that's yes, you can. And in your senior year, if you want to start taking other classes at GPS, you're more than welcome to do that, or other classes on campus. A lot of students do come in and find that they have room after they sort of get used to the core, have room to take other GPS classes and begin to build a kind of an elective, if you will, library of classes in their specialization. So American and comparative business regulation, environmental policy, health policy, inequality and social policy, peace and security. That's a track that takes the notion of security broadly. So it includes things like food security. It looks at issues of border security, cyber security. So it's not guns and bombs, which is the more typical sense of talking about security, climate security, environmental security. How do you guarantee that people have clean water or live in places? So, and so, you know, you choose one of these. Program design and evaluation really focuses on the hard skills. So this is where you would take, you know, the advanced methods classes, all the GIS and remote sensing classes that we have, or the big data class for social sciences that looks at how to manage large data sets with R, how you construct them, how you do the work, where the data itself comes from. Okay. So this is what the area of specialization requirement looks like. It's 5 classes. There's one that you're required to take that we think kind of frames the subject area of the specialization. And then, so you take one required class, and then there are 2 classes from which you choose your second required class. And the idea here is that you sort of choose your way through, you know, through a specialization. Do you want to have it be more methodological or more applied? Do you want to do inequality and social policy and focus on healthcare, or do you want to focus on you focus on education? So you can actually then kind of design your way through the track, right? So the example here is in the program design and evaluation. You have to take what we call QM3, which is the most advanced of the sort of standard methods track, where you learn, it's a sort of extension, if you will, of the econometrics series that you have to take. It's taught by Craig McIntosh, who's an economist. But then you'll choose to do either the evaluating social programs, or the GIS class. So the GIS takes you really deeply into the geographic information systems, building maps and and working in that way. The other one, the evaluating social programs, teaches you how to do a social science survey research. So how do you build a survey to make sure that it's methodologically sound? So for example, if you're interested in health, how do you design a nutrition survey so that you actually get at, so that it's double blind and that it's asking people questions multiple times so that you're getting good information about that you can then code and put into your data set. And then you have elective courses from a prescribed list, and you get to choose the electives. It is possible to specialize in more than one area. A lot of students do, in fact. So they'll, for example, do program design and evaluation and environment, or they'll do security and PD&E, or security and the environment, because they think that there's a lot of overlap in looking at, for example, border security or border politics and environmental issues. Think here, for example, of the border south of us and pollution that affects both sides of the border. Next. Language courses. So the MPP does not have a language requirement. Again, it does not have a language requirement. But GPS has another master's program, the Masters of International Affairs, that does have a language requirement. So we made a decision that students who came into the MPP who wanted to get language proficiency would be allowed to, and to get credit toward the degree. But they must take the language courses for a letter grade, and they must be doing applied classes on the region or country that fits that language. So let's say, for example, that you want to take Portuguese, Brazilian Portuguese, then I would expect that you're going to have work on at least on Latin America or Brazil. And so, for example, if you decide that you want to study education, you're going to take Augustina Paglayan's class on, that's a comparative education course, but she's a Latin Americanist, so one of her main cases in the class is on Latin America broadly. So that would allow you then to get credit for taking Portuguese or Spanish. Okay, this has to be petitioned, not because we're going to tell you you can't do it if you've got all the ducks in a row according to the requirements to do language, but because we want to make sure that you understand that in order to get credit for the language, you must be doing a region outside of the United States in your coursework, okay? Amy? These are the traditional GPS languages. These are the languages that map most closely to the coursework that we do and the applied coursework. They're not necessarily the only languages that we will allow you to do. We do have students doing other kinds of, doing other languages. We have students who are doing French, who are interested in Southeast Asia. So it is possible. It's all in the intellectual, it's in the quality and the strength of the intellectual argument that you make, so that so that we have a sense that you're taking a language that really does enhance the coursework that you're taking, and vice versa. But this is just an example of the coursework. We do offer a second year Spanish and third and or fourth year Japanese, depending on how many students are in there and how good their Japanese is. We have Japanese at GPS, and the rest of these are undergraduate courses at UCSD. So this is what, if you come in as a freshman, this is ideal, typical, not necessarily exactly the way that you would do it, But the idea here is to show you what the program would look like, to show that in fact, it's possible to do it in 5 years, just putting the economics and GPS requirements into play. But you can see, for example, in your senior year that you've only got 1 core class in the fall and 2 required courses in winter and spring. So the possibility of taking other things, other courses in the economics department or taking other GPS courses is absolutely doable. We've plugged in GPEC 446, which is the QM3 class that I talked about a minute ago. We recommend it. It's not required, but we put it in there. And then you'll see in the graduate year, GPEC 443 is GIS, and 444 is advanced GIS. And you'll see that in the winter you have a capstone class, and that's the research elective, that's the research required class that you have to take. Next. And this is what it looks like for transfers, assuming that you come in with all of your lower division work taken care of. So again, you see that you've got room, and the room in the senior year is particularly important for the transfer students because it allows you to do your upper division electives, advanced electives for the econ department, and still get through the core and get your bachelor's degree without being completely worn out and blown apart, right? So the idea for both of you is that you get your bachelor's degree at the end of your senior year, you matriculate to 1 year of graduate work, and then get your master's of public policy at the end of that year. Internal to GPS, we have these certificate programs. These are not official certificates, but they are certificates which you can put on your resume to say that you have taken advanced coursework that goes along with these certificates. So that, for example, if you're particularly interested in environmental work, you can tell a prospective employer that you've completed the spatial analysis certificate or the energy analytics certificate. And what that means is that you've taken a set of courses at GPS, which are considered to be the courses demanded currently in the employment, in the job market by someone who wants to go into that area of employment. These are the certificate courses overlap completely with the other courses that you take at GPS, not the core, but for example, it does allow you to use your capstone. It does allow you to count the courses that you take for your area of specialization. So unlike most of the work that you do as an undergraduate that can't be double counted, the certificate programs at GPS can be. And it just allows you, as I said, then to kind of draw attention to the fact that you've done a consistent set of courses that make you, that give you a sort of specialization in a particular skill. So this is the information about the application, the sort of broad administrative information. The application is due on April 10th this year. That's the only, there's only one application period for the MPP. And so the April 10th is a hard deadline because you can only start the program then in the fall of the next academic year. April 10th is about week 3 or week 4 of spring quarter. You apply through the graduate application. You would choose the public policy designation in there. And if you choose to apply, you will be applying, and it's kind of weird, and it makes sense if you understand the system, but for the first time when you look at the application, When you go into the application, it will actually be asking you to apply to fall of 2022. And the reason for that is that's the year when you actually begin graduate work. So you're going to be filling out a graduate application this year. You'll be doing graduate work next year, but you won't actually be graduate students until fall of 2022. So at that point, graduate division takes over, oversight of your academic file in a sense. Right now, your academic file is overseen by the undergraduate dean. When you become a graduate student, it moves to graduate division. And so that's why you're actually applying to fall of 2022, even though you start graduate work. If you apply this year, next fall, which is fall of 2021, you have to have a statement of purpose. I'll be doing a statement of purpose workshop later this quarter, a resume, transcripts. If you're a transfer student, that would include transcripts from your community college, and two recommendations, two faculty recommendations. Yes, those can be from outside of the econ department. Some of you, for example, if you're transfer students, you might have them from the school from which you transferred. So that's fine as well. Okay, so two faculty recommendations. Amy? So the admissions requirements, it says here that you had an advising appointment with me as a requirement if you take the title on the slide seriously. It's a very strong recommendation, but it's not a requirement. If you want to do this sort of on your own, you're welcome to do that. I don't advise it, but that's up to you. You're all grown-ups. By the time you apply, or by the end of the spring quarter of the year that you apply, you should have completed the math sequence, your lower division requirements. And it is our preference that you have finished the econ sequences 100, 110A, and 120, and then have done, good work toward finishing, in particular, your GE requirements. It's a little odd to be sitting in graduate classes if you're also taking lower division requirements for your GE. It's kind of intellectual whiplash. And so my advice to you is that you have those finished, by the end of the spring year. So by the end of your junior year, that's the year at which you apply. The major GPA, that is to say your upper division coursework for your economics major, should be a 3.4, and your cumulative GPA should be a 3.0. Okay. This is a sort of random set of jobs that students who have left the program have got. We've also got students who work for the United Nations. We've got students who are working for the federal government. We've got students who are working, who get jobs working for all kinds of public and private sector businesses, nonprofits, NGOs, and so on. And so it's really a case of you thinking about what you want to be once you graduate, and then working with GPS Career Services. We have extremely good career services, in-house career services staff that will work very closely with you and so that you can develop your a plan for finding the job that you want when you get out of graduate school. GPS, this gives you some idea of your interaction with GPS Career Services support. You'll go through their orientation. They'll give you a full rundown on all the services that they offer, career coaching, workshops, putting you in contact with employers, alumni all over the world, doing mock interviews with you, helping you develop your employment paperwork, how to write a resume, how to write a good letter of introduction for yourself, how to reach out to employers. We take students on outreach events. Once the world opens back up and we're all allowed to travel again, hopefully. New York, Washington, D.C., San Francisco. I don't know why we have LA here, and San Diego as outreach events, because that's like just up the freeway, but or here, but we try to take you out and introduce you to employers which are interesting to you. And we do these as a group. Between your senior year and your graduate year, you're required to do an internship. And Career Services will help you locate an internship and also helps fund it. So internships can be sort of anything that really suits your interest, and any place around the world. We've had students do local internships. We've had them stay in the United States in all different kinds of places. But we've also had students do internships all over the world: Beijing, the West Bank, in Africa, in Switzerland, in France, in Mexico City, in Rio. I mean, you find the internship and work with Career Services to land the internship, and we will help fund you for that summer. The logic behind the internship is that, first of all, most of you probably don't have a lot of work history on your resume. This allows you to put a relevant piece of work experience on your resume for when you go out to find a job. It's also a way for you to decide whether, you know, the work that you decided that you wanted to do, working for a nonprofit, you know, in a poorly served part of the world, is really the work you want to do. And instead you decide the work is hard, the work is not very well paid, and you come back and decide you want to be a banker. It's good to know that's about yourself before you go out and take a job. Not the banker part, by the way. GPS is just with the help of young staff like Amy. GPS is just starting to get on its game in social media. We have a growing presence on Instagram. ISP is doing better at it than we are, but we're in a race for getting better at it. Facebook, of course, LinkedIn. We encourage you to follow us on these. In particular, this tells you about programming that we're doing, faculty talks, connections to programming that we think is being done in another part of the world that we think is important for our students to be engaged in. Career opportunities, internship opportunities that come up for us, and because we've discovered that students look at Instagram more than they read their email, and so we're starting to use it. It's true. So we're starting to use it more and more to engage with students in the school. And so these are the two dates that I just mentioned a few minutes ago about the application workshop and the personal statement workshop. We will be sending this out via email and posting this on Instagram as we get a little bit closer. But here are the dates. You can put them on your calendar since you're all sitting in front of your computers if this is something that interests you. There'll be a member of GPS admissions at the admissions workshop, at the application workshop, to sort of walk you through the application so that you understand exactly what we'll be looking for when we review applications. Okay, and I'll be talking a little bit more about what a personal statement to a graduate course should look like, because it's a little bit different than the way that you did them when you applied to UCSD. Next. This is my email address. By all means, send me an email if you want to meet with me. I live at that email address. I manage my own calendar. I'm happy to meet with you individually and talk through the requirements and your eligibility and the process. So by all means, I'm happy to help you through. And then the web link here will take you to the requirements so that you can have those also spelled out for you at some place that's a little bit easier for you to find.